You know what? I may as well award Aston Martin second place right now, because quite frankly they deserve it. Aston Martin right now are absolutely on a roll. Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Mike Crack, and Lawrence Stroll have managed to produce a team which is way ahead of their intended schedule of being at top of the table within 5 years of being established. We've heard that before with the likes of Alpine and Renault, their 5-year plans, and they've really not yielded all that much. Oh, what's that I hear? Laura and Otmar fighting again? Well, I wouldn't have seen that coming. We all thought that in 2021 that Lawrence Stroll's 5-year plan of being at the top of the table was a little bit laughable, but right now it actually seems to be paying dividends. Not to mention the whole thing about throwing money at problems not yielding all that much, Toyota being a big example. Just throwing money at your team and hoping for success doesn't guarantee you success. But this time around it actually seems to be doing a lot of good. And that's mainly down to the fact that Aston Martin have cracked something that Mercedes and Ferrari haven't. Consistency. Charles Leclerc right now, or as some people are calling him, Charles the Crash, is really having to overdrive the car and thusly making some very, very weird mistakes and crashing out. And then we've got Mercedes potentially having a little bit of a rift between Lewis and George. There's a little bit of tension there that wasn't there last year. There's all of that kind of stuff and the uncertainty about the W14, them hoping that it would have been better than last year, and now they've really not figured things out and they're having to make a B-spec car. Their efforts have been distracted, whereas Aston Martin have really just been under the radar, and then they just so happen to produce a really good car and now attracted the attention of Red Bull. They really need to be careful, because Christian Horner and Red Bull, they will come for you. Remember the whole green Red Bull joke that they made? It wasn't a very funny joke. Aston Martin are now playing with the big boys, and they need to be aware of what the big boys will do to try and undermine you. But I think they'll actually be able to do it. They've got plenty of plans for the next few years, including a rumoured bid to become the Honda Works team in 2026. Hey, Fernando, calm down. Don't make me put you in the dark bit.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's better. Honda and Aston Martin will be able to work together and thusly improve on the 5-year plan that would have been established after 2025. Going into the brand new era of engine regulations and tech regulations with a brand new works team, this will actually be the next afterburner stage of Aston Martin's progression to the top, if they haven't gotten there already. And I think they're taking a few leaves out of Mercedes' book, in that during the Hamilton-Bottas years, they had a very, very steady ship. They didn't rock the boat too much, at least with their drivers, and thusly reap dividends on the track. And I think we're actually starting to see that in a similar way too. What Hamilton liked about Bottas is that he was a team player. There weren't really that many confrontations. Of course we did get some with Bottas 2.0 and him wanting to establish himself, but I don't really see that happening with Lance and Fernando. In fact, we're seeing so many times that Fernando views Lance as a proper teammate, a person that for the first time in a very long time, he can actually sit down after a race and talk strategy without the feeling that Lance is out to get him or out to try and undermine him in some way. Like what Fernando had with Esteban Ocon for the last couple of seasons. Fernando said that the main purpose of Ocon in that team was to try and find a way to beat him. Fernando wanted Ocon to do well, defend like a lion, whereas he actually ended up defending like a lion cub. The point is that Fernando and Lance get the bigger picture, whereas teams like Mercedes and Ferrari right now, and kind of Red Bull too, don't understand. The whole aura that I'm getting from Formula One teams these days is that you have to have 2 stellar drivers that are really popular, really famous, and really good. But the problem is if you have that, they're gonna clash. Under the surface, do you really want that tension in your team? And Lance Stroll, being the son of the guy who owns the team, Papa Stroll wants glory. And Lance does too. And yes, the whole thing with Fernando and Honda, I'm pretty sure that's a joke. I'm sure that Fernando and Honda can patch things up if Fernando's still around in 2026, which I think he might be. I could easily see Fernando right now going past 45 and maybe being even 50 years old and still in Formula One. Could he actually break the 500 Grand Prix barrier? And I think that actually might be plausible because Mike Crack, the team principal, actually states the whole modus operandi of the team is to not take risks when they don't have to. Not playing the lottery, he says in his own words. The one time they did try and do that and try and save a set of tires in Miami, that led to Lance Stroll qualifying 18th and out in Q1. They learned from their mistakes and they realized, oh, okay, we're going to hold our hand up. We're not going to do that again. They are going to play it safe. Not try and rush things, not try and seek glory where they don't have to if they can bring in solid points, because Fernando scored 15 points every single race this season. Yes, of course, sprint races, yada yada yada, but That chart is a very satisfying one too on the up and up. He's 3rd place in the championship and Aston are 2nd place in the constructors. Can you imagine that if Lance actually gets his head around and is actually driving similar to Fernando, just a couple of places up, they will guarantee 2nd place, because at the moment, Mercedes don't really seem to be at that place. Ferrari don't really seem to be in that place because Charles Leclerc is having to overdrive that car, and he's really in a team that shouldn't be making cars that a driver needs to overdrive. It should be able to come naturally to that driver, and Carlos Sainz is being a smooth operator and bringing in the bacon and trying to salvage anything that comes from Charles Leclerc's misfortunes. Red Bull, they really don't need to do much different because they're absolutely fantastic right now. But one time this year, I bet a flashpoint will occur between Perez and Verstappen, and that might actually lead to Aston Martin getting one of their first wins. But in terms of the history of Formula 1, Aston Martin right now have an absolutely banger lineup. They've got a very, very, very good driver, a 2-time world champion who is having the time of his life, as well as a driver who is okay and solid, but he really needs to step up to the plate as well. But he'll have time to do it, I'm sure of it. I still find it really weird that Fernando is being such a team player. I've seen him so long in Formula 1, being the guy who rubs people up the wrong way, but then can also yield miracle results. I actually became an Alonso fan in 2012 when he drove that car, which was clearly the 4th fastest car that year, to the world title, almost. He was nearly there. He drove the pants off that car. That's where I gained absolute admiration for the guy, because what he'd be able to do in underrated cars. Well, let's be real here. I mean, you can only do so much in the McLarens of 2015 to 2017. But until Mercedes and Ferrari can get a grip and figure out what they want to do with their teams and their lineups and their cars and their drivers, Aston just have to play it safe, go very, very smoothly, and get all of the legwork done in the first half of the season to secure themselves a really high place on the leaderboard. And think about it, if they ended up 2nd place, they will end up potentially having double the prize money of what they had last year. Maybe between 60, 70, $80 million extra in prize money. Think of what they can actually use that money for. They can use that to further develop their car or recoup some of the benefits that Lawrence Stroll has put into the team, and be able to build their resources even more over the coming years. They're doing a really good job here in a time where Red Bull is utterly dominating. No one's really thinking about securing 2nd place. They're trying to go for 1st place, whereas Aston Martin, they're quite happy just being the best of the rest, because after the first couple of years that they've had, I think they'll take a 2nd place. I'll see you in the comments.